Good morning, adventurers. My name is Ben, and welcome to a morning show where I sit around, drink some tea, and talk about D&D. First up for T&D today, we have the Katami Conservancy. There we go. Otis Fat Bear Week Champion mug from last year. This is my fiance's mug. She is very kind in letting me use it, even though I didn't tell her I was using it. Inside of it, I'm a genius, so I didn't bring it in here, is some tension taper because my head hurts because I was out in the sun a lot today. I'm well hydrated. I have some ibuprofen in my body. I just the throbbing of the sun made my brain hurt. So that's where we're at right now. So I apologize if I'm a little bit weird today. But getting into what we're actually talking about today, we're talking about 3 things that you should be prepping for your session 1, and 1 thing that you shouldn't be prepping for your session 1. This is aimed, I guess, more towards new DMs, players who want to DM for the first time, or a DM that hasn't done a campaign or a game in a while. So if you're any of those, hang in there, stay tuned. And if you're an experienced DM who runs games all the time, this honestly might be something for you to keep track of too, because quite frankly, the only thing that we do slightly more than finish campaigns is start campaigns, because campaigns peter off. I said that, I think, backwards. I think it should have been that the only thing we do less than start campaigns is finish campaigns, but that's not really the point. So let's go ahead and let's dive into the 3 things that I think you need to be prepping for your session 1 of a new campaign. Let's just go for it. The first thing that you need to prep for the session 1 of your new campaign is a series of shops, taverns, or passers-by, and the NPCs that go along with them to a degree. That's very important. This stuff is to a degree. Session 1, it's early on, and so you shouldn't be pouring hours and hours and hours of prep into this, but you also sort of need to prep a little bit more than maybe you would for a session like 6 or something, where the world has already sort of been established around the characters. So the reason that I think you need to prep shops, taverns, passerby is because it is what makes the world feel alive. It is what actually draws people into the world that you are creating. It is what makes people want to interact with the game that you are running here. Specifically, I'm saying this because session 1 is always where people sit down, they're feeling goofy, they're feeling silly, they're feeling like, ooh, what are we gonna do here? Let's talk to everybody. Let's see what happens when things go on. So there's probably going to be more random NPC interactions in session 1 than there is going to be in session 6. In session 6, they're probably down the road to whatever quest you set them on, starting in session like 3 or 4 or whatever. And so they're not going to be running into just random people. But in session 1, when they are orienting themselves, when everybody's trying to figure out the space, then it's helpful to have a list of random NPCs you can just pull from. Random shops that you can just pull from, random taverns that you can just pull from, and maybe designate some of those NPCs as, this is the tavern keep, this is the shop owner, this is, make your life easy is really what it comes down to. Have those things kind of off to the side and ready, but also you're not looking to flesh out full lifelong backstories for these characters. You're just trying to make sure that they have enough bite to them to where they actually are something if they are interacted with. And so that's really the bar you're hitting. It's not a very high bar, but it is a bar that you need to hit. If you are not great at pulling names out of nowhere, this is especially helpful. You should do this for the rest of your sessions as well. You should just have that list with you. If you are good at pulling names out of nowhere, you should also have this list for the record, because sometimes you sit there and they ask you, oh, what's the shopkeep's name? And the only name you can think of is Aardvark, and that's an interesting choice for a name for a half-orc, but that's fine. Real story. So have a little resource on your side there. It'll make your life easier, and it will help facilitate the figuring out of the dynamic that the players are going to be doing. Now, this specifically, and really sort of all through this is for the party that is forming. This isn't for like a drop-in campaign where they're all level 12 and they've been together for years. There will be some of this like dynamic figuring out going on no matter what, but for the most part, if they are the ones that are just getting together or just figuring out the adventuring thing, then they're going to be the ones that are more slapsticky and running around like maniacs, because that is kind of the way that it just sort of goes. Every single D&D table I've ever sat at has been that way. People are excited, they want to get their words in, and so you are looking for that opportunity with every NPC, every PC, every physical thing they could possibly interact with. So give yourself a break, have some shops, some taverns, some NPCs, just ready to go. Just, if you don't prep anything else, that is the thing that you should prep in my mind, honestly, because it'll make your life a lot easier when you can look down at a list and just read something off instead of going, yes, his name is David and he runs the three-legged stool. Because that makes you feel like a moron, and you don't want that as you're running there. Because, again, this is geared towards early, newish DMs or DMs who are trying to get back up on the horse or something like that. You want the confidence of being like, I was ready for this. Because when you don't have the I was ready for this confidence, then you're like, oh god, everything's going terribly. Or you're at session like 30-something, and everything is a disaster anyway, and that's fine then. So, that's my number one for you. Have shops, taverns, NPCs ready to go. Number 2, have a simple quest. And you might be thinking, well, but I want to start this into my long campaign. No, you want a simple quest. You want a 1-session quest. Maybe 2-session, but you want a 1-session quest. You want a quest that can be accomplished in 1 session for your first session of D&D as a DM, as the beginning of a new campaign, whether or not you have lots of experience or no experience at all. The reality is that a lot of games die after or by like the 3rd session. That's the way that it goes. People stop being able to commit to the time, or they try it and they're like, we're moving really slow, we don't really like this. Try and get around that. The way that I have found best to do that is to have a single session quest for your first session. Something very straightforward. Almost always like a fetch quest kind of thing. Like a, hey, my ring was stolen. Could you find it for me? Yes is the answer, and then they go and find it and they bring it back and they get rewarded. Then, if the game ends there, it ended on a moderately satisfying note. Don't get me wrong, people who have put a lot of time into their backstories will be shattered to find out that they won't get to play their funky little dudes anymore, but they at least accomplished a thing while they were there. It is not something that you're trying to like sow the seeds for your super long goal way out in the distance. You can do that a little bit, but you want to have something that is immediately accomplishable. People's attention spans, when they haven't invested hours and hours and hours and hours and hours into sitting at the table already, is way shorter than you might think. And so you really you want to have something that can be accomplished in that first session, because you want them to have that reward loop started that early on. It's a psychology thing. And actually, a good sort of addition-ish to this is it needs to be simple and short, because if you play for 4 hours, they will spend anywhere between 1 to 3 of those hours messing around with NPCs, shops, and each other. That's the way that it goes. So you want it to be something that is like, you can walk in there and get it. You want it to be something where you can build it out so that you can take pieces out of it in the middle and it doesn't lose any of its potency as you go. Like if it is this fetch quest and they spend 3 hours just like horsing around yelling at each other in a tavern or something like that before they even get the quest, you want it to be something where it can be like, yes, they go into this bandit camp, they fight for the ring, they get it, and they come back right away. That's the end of it. Or if it's a we're very on task, we're very ready to go kind of group, it can be, they get the information for this, they go investigate, they spend some time like looking around, they go ahead, they start to go in, they have to go through a series of traps and trials and stuff like that. Maybe it becomes like a prove your worth kind of thing where the bandit leader will give it back to them if they do this thing for him, or they prove to him that they are good enough for whatever. Give yourself that kind of like lateral movement, but keep it simple. Don't make it overly complicated, because the other thing is, if you get bogged down in something like that, it's just going to be slow, and that's not a good like impact for your first session. In the same note, and still in the same line, I said it a little bit already, don't have long combat in your first thing. Unless the game is about combat, unless your game is about combat specifically. D&D is about combat for many reasons that the rules lay out for you. But if your game is about combat, then you want it to be a technically intensive, combat-intensive kind of thing. If your game is not about combat, don't have a long combat in there. Usually at the beginning of campaigns, people are pretty low level, so they won't be able to survive a long combat anyway. But if you try and do a bunch of moving parts things, try and really like make it this interesting, like mechanically difficult thing, you're going to lose people very fast. And that's just the way that it goes. What you want to do is you want to have a quick, like, I run in, punch, 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 spell, 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 done. Like you want it to be something you can get through nice and quick so that when people are done with it, they're done with it and they feel like they accomplished something. They feel like they just scraped by, which is really great. And quite frankly, if they are a get to it kind of party and they breeze through everything and you finish in 2 hours, 2 hours is a perfectly good D&D session length, first off. Second, that's fine. You can just stop there and be like, that's what I have prepped, guys. And that's the end of it. And you can then sit there for the next 2 hours that you guys are scheduled to play and talk about what you want to do going forward, the way that you want these characters to develop, because you will have a good idea at that point if they are going to be committed to continuing or not. And so, with all of that, that's the long version of why you should have a simple, short, 1 session long quest as your first session. And my third reason here, this one is one that always bugs me. This one that just kind of like flies under the radar for most people. And so I think that it is very important to prep. And it is something you're going to have to improvise a little bit of on the fly, but it's something you should have a pretty solid idea of as you go into it. Number 3 is the reason that the party is together at all. The you meet in a tavern thing is great, but there has to be a reason that they meet in a tavern and it is significant. I met some dude at my door 30 minutes ago. He walked up and knocked on my door and asked if somebody lived here that doesn't live here. I said nope, and he moved on. And it was an insignificant interaction to me because I don't know the man. He doesn't know me. We said something to each other and we moved on. The idea is that you are going to try and form this bond that will hopefully last for a very long time, long campaign if that's what you're going for. But you're trying to create this bond between the characters so that there's a reason that they're together. Otherwise, they just go, well, why am I even here? And they could just walk out. If you have seen Campaign 1 of Critical Role, mild spoilers, I guess, you get that when Vax and Grog are nipping back and forth at each other. At one point, Vax looks at his sister and says, why are we even here? This guy hates me. Why am I here? Nobody cares. Why do I continue with this group? And so you want to make sure that that reason is well entrenched, and it'll develop over time. It'll change as you go forward to essentially everybody likes each other a lot, and so they stuck around. But you need to give them a good reason. One of my favorite ones is that everybody is wrongfully suspected. Well, maybe everybody, maybe mostly everybody, is wrongfully suspected of some kind of a crime, and so the city watch is chasing them, and the best way for them to get out of it is for them to be together. And they discover through that series of trials that they actually work really well together, and that is what sort of drives the story moving forward from there. It can be something as simple as that. It can be they all get hired to do something. It can be they all have to sit down at the same table in a tavern because the rest of them are full and they get to talking. It can be whatever you want, but have a reason why the party is actually together. So those are my 3 things that you should be prepping for your first session. Let's talk about the one thing that everybody starts to prep, but you really shouldn't prep for your first session. And that is the whole dang story. Do not go into it with your whole story mapped out. You will be disappointed ultimately. Well, I don't know that I should say you should be disappointed, or you will be disappointed. You will not have that story fulfilled in the way that you were expecting at that point. And you're going to have to either be okay with that, or you're going to be sad when the story doesn't come to fruition in that way. You can have general ideas of where you want it to go. I do story mapping before I start a campaign so that I have a general idea of where we're trying to hit. But I don't plan every individual thing all the way along there. I might know what the ending is going to be, but I am ready for it to change at any given point. Any given point in time, something could change. And so don't sit down, write your story, and then in session 1, when the players decide to go east instead of west, you have to throw the whole thing out, or at least delay it until you can get them back on the track that you want them to. Plus, it allows for a more sandboxy kind of game if that is what you were going for, if you don't have a full plan mapped out in front of you. If you have things that the world is moving towards, that's different than having the storyline planned out. You don't necessarily want to go into it with that expectation, because that expectation is probably not going to be what ends up being told. The long campaign that I'm running right now, I knew who the bad guy was going to be from the very beginning. Well, session 2, technically. I had an idea for where it was going to go from session 1, but I didn't know if we were going past session 1. Again, one session quest. I had an idea of where it was going, and then I knew who the bad guy was going to be starting in session 2, and I made my benchmarks for the story from there, and we have hit a couple of them, and we have had to move those benchmarks way off to the side for a couple other ones. That's just the way it goes. It's about being flexible, and so if you go in with a written story, it's going to be tough to flex in the way that you want to, or in the way that you're going to need to, I guess, really. But that is everything I have to talk to you guys about on that. Those are the 3 things that you should be prepping, and the 1 thing that you should not be prepping for your first session. Getting into the shows that we have today and this weekend, we have, in no particular order, Mayhem D&D, Off the Rails, Oxventure, Just Roll With It, The Strings of Fate, Rolling with Difficulty, The World of Low, The Crown DM, and Coming Together Naturally today. Tomorrow, we have Dice Funk and Strange Hungers, and then Sunday, we have Super Idols, Roll For Your Life, Grinning Griffin, Dungeon Drunks, Library of Nightmares, The Chaos Brigade, Rise of the Forsaken, Chromatic Dice, The Stradcast, High Rollers, and Tabletop Notch. Go check them out. Let them know that I sent you, because again, someday somebody's going to say something to me about it, and I'm going to think that it's very funny. But until then, I'm just going to keep asking you guys to do it. Yep, that's pretty much it. Next week is the 1-year anniversary of this show. Yay! I'm going to figure out some kind of way to celebrate for it. I'll keep you guys in the loop, obviously. I don't have it right now. I don't know what it is, but I'll figure it out, and we'll go with that. But expect some kind of announcement, hopefully, on Monday about that. Either via this or on Twitter or something like that. So if you don't follow me on Twitter, go follow me on Twitter, I guess. But that is everything I have for you guys today. So, thank you so very much for making me a part of your morning routine. I really do appreciate it. And thank you so much in particular to my patrons. You guys are the ones that make this show possible. If you're interested in becoming a patron, check out the link in the episode description. Yeah, that's everything. So, once again, with all that said, don't forget, everybody, drink tea, play D&D, and keep on rolling.